It's as simple as taking the contract that you've just received, you upload that into Wilson. There are existing playbooks inside of Wilson available out of the box, which will review your NDAs, MSAs, and DPAs. You can tailor those to your positions. Both lawyers and paralegals use the tools. The first port of call is Wilson, who works like a junior. So when you're reaching out to Wilson, that means that it's taking you sort of 80% of the way there on tasks. What's interesting is we're also running training sessions now with actual paralegals. It's part of the future of the profession, being right at the forefront. We've seen paralegals are particularly good at learning how to use these tools and then increasing their leverage, which I think is seriously exciting. It's a whole new career path, a case of making the overall quality of client service much higher, and that will drive additional demand for legal services.
On today's Legally Speaking podcast, I'm delighted to be joined by Gus Neate. Gus is the CEO and co-founder of WilsonAI, an AI-driven platform designed to streamline legal operations for businesses. An engineer by background, Gus qualified as a private equity lawyer at Clifford Chance. He has experience working in the product team at a legal tech platform, H4, and multiple in-house legal teams. So a very big warm welcome to the show, Gus.
Cheers, Rob. Great to be on. Thank you so much for having me here today. Looking forward to it.
Oh, super excited for today's discussion and all the great things you've been getting up to and indeed your career prior. But before we get into that, we do have a customary icebreaker question here on the Legally Speaking podcast, which is on the scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being very real, what would you rate the hit TV series Suits in terms of its reality of the law if you've seen it on a scale of 1 to 10?
I might go with an 8. This is quite strong. But I remember when I first joined Clifford Chance, I mean, the lifts in Clifford Chance are almost identical to the lift in Suits. And I was lucky I got to sit with a fantastic partner there in the corner office, which was like, it's not quite as big as the one in Suits, but it was pretty epic. So I do remember I was slightly surprised. And there was there were some equivalents of Donners who were completely running the entire show behind the scenes. So I was struck certainly early in my career by how similar in many ways it was to Suits. The only bit that is different is that often the work, the drudgery of the sort of 3 a.m. digging through documents kind of looks quite fun in the Suits diamond, but usually in reality that can be quite a task.
Well, look, we rarely get 8, so we're going to take the 8 and move swiftly on because you justified it beautifully. So to begin with, Gus, would you mind telling our listeners a bit about your background and career journey?
Yeah, of course, absolutely. So I guess my background is that I was originally technical. I studied engineering at Oxford, enjoyed kind of building both hardware and software. But then in quite an unusual move, I chose to focus on then becoming a lawyer, going through law school, worked in a range of legal tech businesses. I think you mentioned H4, but also one called Clifford Chance Applied Solutions, which was Clifford Chance selling into its existing client base certain technology products. Then I became a lawyer at Clifford Chance, trained in their London office, was lucky to get to do secondments to in-house legal teams, and then became a private equity lawyer. It's worth mentioning that kind of after doing that, the next big stage was going through an accelerator program called Entrepreneur First. That was where I met my co-founder, a guy called Alex Wang, who's incredibly smart. I was very lucky to get to meet him. He's Cambridge Computer Science and Maths, absolute genius. And he's the kind of brains behind what we're building at WilsonAI. And then it was about 9 months ago that we now founded the company, raised a pre-seed round in San Francisco and New York, but happy to dive into all of it in a bit more detail.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll definitely get into that part of the journey. I guess taking your mind back to, you mentioned obviously you studied engineering at the University of Oxford. What drew you to a career in the law?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question. So I guess from my perspective, there are two things, one of which is that I love that the law is often the underlying nature of almost all commercial agreements. So fundamentally, when people agree to transact on anything, usually they are falling back on the law there. So that means that similarly to engineering, it feels like it's an underlying fabric that goes across society that's extremely important. The other piece that I found really interesting was that knowing that fairly few people from engineering backgrounds go into the law as an industry and that a lot of the work is automatable, I thought it'd be particularly interesting for me to go and take a look, being like, oh, I've seen what people can do with software. Now it'd be really interesting to go and dive really deeply into the industry to understand how it works and why it's structured the way it is at the moment.
Yeah, I love that. That's very forward thinking as well. So then you obviously qualify into PE at Clifford Chance. What did you most enjoy about working at a Magic Circle law firm? You mentioned the Donners, you mentioned the lifts, but was there anything else?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there are well, probably two things that I really enjoyed. The quality of the people is exceptional, which is fantastic. So I was able to learn from amazing people and work alongside amazing people who worked really hard. There was fantastic training and then exceptional client focus. So I did see that people are obsessed with doing the best job for their clients. Which brings me on to my second favorite thing there, which is probably the actual clients themselves. Often you're working with people that are also absolutely leading in their field. It makes it extremely interesting to kind of get directly into their shoes and understand what it is they really want from their legal services. Normally that's to find ways to achieve their business outcomes in manners that are sort of legally sound. That's, which I think is really interesting and important. And that was drilled into me really well by Clifford Chance.
Yeah, and I always think if you're around really great people, that naturally brings you up to their level as well. So I guess that leads to my next interesting question. What inspired you to leave the traditional legal world? You're arguably one of the best law firms out there. What inspired you to say to leave and then start Wilson AI? Was there a particular moment?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think prior to going to Clifford Chance, I did kind of work a bit in legal tech, and it was clear at that stage that there was a lot of potential to start automating legal work, but I would say the tools weren't quite there. Obviously, with the release of GPT in 2023, a lot has changed since then, and the pace of progress has continued to be extremely rapid. That's made a massive difference for what you can automate and the quality of solutions. One thing I still think is the case, and luckily you're seeing it changing a bit more, is you don't see that many tools built by lawyers kind of for lawyers. There are examples which are, but I think that's I felt that was an exceptionally good thing to do. Often I was seeing lawyers saying, wow, I wonder like who they got testing this with my existing tooling, because it doesn't feel like it actually makes it easier. I felt that meant there was a massive opportunity at the moment.
Yeah, so you can see it from both sides, and obviously then you've collaborated with your co-founder and you've obviously produced Wilson AI, which I do like. But tell our listeners, as CEO and co-founder of Wilson AI, what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. So we think of Wilson like an AI paralegal. So what that means is that it will help with doing tasks to sort of 70 to 90% of the task will be done, but you keep humans in the loop to supervise. And those humans are usually lawyers, but it can also be paralegals supervising the AI paralegal. They then supervise and double check the work. The key things that Wilson actually helps with, there's sort of a big three. One of them is reviewing contracts. So what happens there is you can have a playbook that you can apply across, for example, a third-party contract that applies and marks it up based on all of your positions. That's the first bucket. The second bucket is across historic documents, extracting the key terms. And that often comes up in kind of due diligence or risk flagging exercises and can be very time intensive. And then the last one is kind of answering common Q&A, often that's inside your existing systems or across your policies. Again, the key thing here is that as an AI paralegal, we're always giving really easily verifiable sources, for example. So a lawyer can just jump in quickly to double check the work, similarly that if you're working with a fantastic trainee or paralegal.
Yeah, no, I love how you kind of mentioned the balance there. Obviously, the tech's doing the tech and the human impact doing the human bit there. I strongly believe that mission-led companies are the ones that are going to survive and thrive. So Wilson AI's mission, as I understand it, aims to make world-class legal support instantly accessible to every business. Love that mission, because I say if they're not big enough and don't scare you, then you need to go back to the drawing board. But can you explain your mission in more detail to us?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess what that really means is the way that we view having the human in the loop here is having world-class legal support being instantly available to all businesses. What that really means is where you can instantly have an AI answer that is suitable, that should be provided. But what we want to be able to do is give that AI as the sort of first port of call anywhere it's appropriate, but make sure that you're having humans looped in continually where that's also required. So that speaks a little bit to where we see the future of legal services going, which is that people will heavily use AI, but there will of course be humans jumping in, plugging the gaps, training the systems, understanding the risk tolerances of businesses. We really want to be able to kind of provide that end-to-end for businesses, which is what we're building towards.
Yeah, and I guess that leads nicely, and you've kind of touched on this, but we're trying to take our listeners on a journey with AI and legal tech, and probably as episodes go a little bit deeper so we can educate and inform. So you have different features with Wilson AI, review, query, and oversight. So would you mind just outlining in a little bit more detail how Wilson AI works in those respects?
Yeah, of course, maybe. So starting on the review side, it's as simple as taking the contract that you just received, you upload that into Wilson. There are existing playbooks inside of Wilson available out of the box, which will review, your NDAs, MSAs, and DPAs, but you can tailor those to your position. Then when you press run, Wilson goes through the document and does a red, amber, or green rating for kind of each of the points in the playbook. If something is a red or an amber risk, it will then suggest exactly the red line to put into the document. You can then go to that red line and say, yes, agree, disagree, which allows you to speed up massively the process of marking that document up. The key thing that we're then doing is feeding back what users do back into the system, so it continually improves and learns from their input. That's the first one about reviews. The extraction piece is a little bit different. So that tends to work with historic signed documents of any format. You can upload a large batch of documents. Then depending on the document type, Wilson can assist with pulling out things like payment terms, notice dates, whether or not the indemnity aligns with your standard positions. And it produces a sort of tabular output. You'd be able to very quickly understand, okay, we've got 4 contracts that we need to renegotiate because the payment terms aren't in line with what we need for our current fundraising, for example. And then the last one is the Q&A. This one is most similar to kind of the use of, if anyone listening uses things like ChatGPT or Claude. As simply you go in, you ask a question, Wilson's connected into your data systems, so it will find and then source for you. It actually looked, even if the people who use Perplexity, it has similar sourcing saying, oh, here we go, I found that you have like an InfoSec policy, the answer is here. You can then double click on that to check that the answer is correct, because we're very focused on making sure that things are verifiably correct as well as correct.
Yeah, and that's so important as well to build trust and indeed enhance adoption. Okay, I see a lot of, you've had a successful journey very early on into WilsonAI, but, for legal techs to really thrive and for law firms and legal teams to actually adopt and buy, you need to really articulate the pain point it's solving. So to simplify things now, what problem or problems does WilsonAI specifically solve?
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, the first problem, I guess taking each feature in turn, the first problem that WilsonAI would be solving is for teams that are spending too long on lower value repetitive contract reviews. Often that means that, for example, you're seeing business like sales cycles being delayed. So you may receive a large quantity of MSAs that you're hoping to sign, but the fact that it takes a long time to go through each of those, sometimes it can be 2 to 3 hours for each term. That basically delays the amount of revenue you can book. So the problem we solve is we're saving legal time and we're actually making doing those deals a much quicker process. When it comes to term extraction, the problem that we're usually solving there is that people have saved down all of their documents, but they don't really know what's in them. And then they know that if they would like to know what's in them, they can either hire people or perhaps go to a law firm and pay a pretty staggering sum often to go through all of those documents and pull it out. Really, this is often being done for risk review exercises. I wish I could tell how many of my contracts align with the new standards we just set. That is a big issue for teams, and it's usually very expensive to solve. We're able to kind of surface that information much more quickly. And then the last piece is around this Q&A side around policies. Really, the pain point that we are hearing from teams is they deal with a big range of stakeholders in the business. And really legal almost are acting like a knowledge center. Often it's like, oh, legal will know that, which means they get swamped across all sorts of channels, tons of things filling their legal inbox, probably filling their Slack inbox or Teams. And therefore starting to make it more self-serve, it almost operates like a training system. So you see legal teams say, I'm swamped. I wish people would be more trained to understand actually that this is like in our internal systems. Wilson's like kind of jumping in and filling the gap to saying, I can take some of the more basic things off your plate.
Today's episode is brought to you by Clio, leaders in legal tech and the team behind one of the most exciting AI launches this summer. Clio Duo is arriving this summer and it's already creating a stir. Built right into Clio Manage, Duo uses AI to help you draft emails, capture time, summarize documents automatically. It's smart, seamless, and designed to save you hours every week. Find out more and see what Clio Duo can do for your firm at clio.com/UK. Now back to the show.
I think that was a really good way to sort of simplify it, and people can visualize actually the real problems that it's solving. Because this is what I talk a lot about on the show, is tech for good. To improve your lifestyle, your well-being as a lawyer. To take away the drudgery, to increase efficiency, happiness. It all matters. Okay, let's talk about in-house legal team, because at WilsonAI, you're starting with in-house legal teams because they can control the majority of the legal budget and are closest to the decision making, as you say. So taking into consideration your own experiences from working in-house, as mentioned, could you explain further why WilsonAI is focusing on in-house teams and why you think they are right at the starting point of legal AI adoption?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what we're hearing from in-house legal teams is fascinating, I think, is they have all the right incentives to adopt AI. So they are billing out by the hour. So becoming quicker at their tasks is directly beneficial for business outcomes. So often what they're being measured on is things like SLAs. If they are much quicker, then the business moves faster. And that's a massive win for these in-house legal teams. And we're seeing that's meaning that the pace of adoption in in-house legal teams is much quicker. What's interesting is even the case that you're seeing adoption at the in-house legal team and also business users. So you're seeing people say, could I self-serve the sales contract? Is there certain types of sales contract? Can I have them use a platform ahead of even coming to legal? So then the whole business moves quicker. One of the things I always really enjoyed at Clifford Chance was getting very close to what the clients or the business teams really cared about. What's really interesting working with in-house teams is they're right in that mix as well. So we're often we see people in the business using Wilson too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I love what you're doing for the in-house community. And we remind listeners actually to go back and listen to Ben White's episode from Crafty Counsel, who's featuring doing some great work in the in-house space and indeed on the sort of tech side. So let's talk about the evolution then of in-house teams. How do you think the role of in-house legal teams is going to evolve and is evolving? And how does AI support this shift?
Absolutely. So, I mean, what we're seeing is that when you start to automate some of the lower hanging fruit as an in-house lawyer, that allows you to get even closer to the business and strategic decision making. So we're often seeing that lawyers are being turned to look around corners. So that they're setting the risk profile, which the tool will use. And once you've set up the policy, actually not as much has to come to you, which means you can kind of look down the line and say, okay, are we going to need a regulatory approval here? How should we be handling that? Or what's our next key milestone? So they're moving closer to sort of strategic business advisors, and then also setting risk parameters for tools. I think that's a pretty exciting change, and we're seeing that that's really empowering in-house legal teams to go further and closer to the business and do less of the drudgery.
And I think that may eventually help bridge that sort of, well-known conception that, cost center. The more that you can free up the time to show that you're not a cost center, you're a genuine value add and can help, really add that value to the organization. I think that's good for team culture as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's awesome to see when you see someone previously the cost center thing is if you're driving revenue much more quickly by getting a tool that means you all book your sales contracts faster. Everyone's turning around and go, wow, okay, what else can legal do? Because that seems unbelievably important for our business.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. Okay, you talked earlier about paralegals. I want to kind of go back to that because, WilsonAI are very much powering the transition with the AI paralegal tools to enhance teams' expertise. So can you just tell us a little bit more about the paralegal tools?
Yeah, of course. So, I mean, it's similar tools to what we see being used by lawyers. So both lawyers and paralegals use the tools. What's really happening there is it's the first port of call is Wilson, who works like a junior. So when you're reaching out to Wilson, that means that it's taking you sort of 8% of the way there on tasks. What's interesting is we're also running training sessions now with actual paralegals because it's part of the sort of future of the profession being right at the forefront. We've seen paralegals are particularly good at learning how to use these tools and then increasing their leverage, which I think is seriously exciting. And it's a whole new career path, really. Could be an expert in how to adopt and set up fantastic systems that reduce certain areas of work that wasn't as interesting.
I'm putting my legal recruitment hat on. I think that's a good way to future-proof careers as well, and through that collaborating as well, and actually informing and educating and retooling. I think that's a really good opportunity to keep people engaged, excited, and just all good stuff when it comes to culture. Leading to that, then, I guess, is AI replacing lawyers. There is a lot of talk about AI replacing lawyers, particularly from people outside of the law, of course, who read the headlines in the media, et cetera, et cetera. But how do you see WilsonAI assisting lawyers rather than replacing legal professionals?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's I mean, looking back perhaps more historically, it's clear that, there were very similar conversations that I had about, things like the accounting industry with the introduction of Excel. I think what really will happen here is lawyers will be able to do more work, and the standards that people expect in their legal support are going to go up. And the ability to access great legal services, I think, will also increase. So what that really means is you would expect clients to want contracts turned around much more quickly. You might expect smaller businesses to be more willing to hire lawyers or to use more legal services. So I think overall you'll see the pie grow a lot, and that actually I think people will retool, and the role of being a lawyer will be different in the same way as like accountants who are doing manual ledgers would now obviously all use Excel tools. But I think that realistically, it's not a case of reducing the number of jobs here. It's a case of making the overall quality of client service much higher, and that will drive additional demand for legal services.
Yeah, and I want to pick up on a point you mentioned there, because I was having a conversation with a boutique law firm owner who is actually a developer by background himself. You were saying about the role of the future lawyer and what that looks like. He was saying quite verbosely that, you need developers in law firms now. That needs to be just as important as part of future-proofing the legal journey. What's your view on that in terms of, the lawyer versus not necessarily just being the lawyer, but moving more to having, sales, development type skills as well as a future lawyer?
Absolutely. I think it's like one of these big trends, people call it kind of like O-shaped lawyers as well, right? Where you have lawyers that actually are very experienced in other fields. Yep. I think that's extremely valuable. I saw at Clifford Chance, they had, like a data science team. They would be doing pieces that were extremely important and very complementary to what the lawyers were doing. We do the same thing at Wilson. So obviously there's a consistent feedback loop between engineers and legal expertise to understand like how to improve tasks. So I certainly think it makes sense to have a broad range of skills, including engineering mixed with legal skills in law firms and in in-house legal teams.
Yeah, and you make a really good point about O-shaped as well. And I'd encourage folks again to go and check out our episode with Dan Kane, the founder of the O-shaped lawyer, because he gives some really good insights on what he's building there. I think it's super powerful and a great initiative. You've talked about verifiable, and that leads nicely to what I wanted to ask you about some of the ethical considerations, because we're not still there where everyone is 100% on board with this and has skepticism and a little bit concerned. So what ethical considerations do you think law firms and indeed legal teams should be mindful of if they're looking to adopt, or when they're looking to adopt, these AI tools?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a fantastic point to pick up. I mean, I think it's important to make sure, maybe it kind of comes back a little bit to what we were talking about before about the future of the profession and training. I think one of the key ethical considerations is how do you roll this out safely, and how do you train your people to use it? What we're seeing there is often this is about maintaining client confidentiality, ensuring that your future workforce are well equipped to use these tools and well placed there. And I think also one thing that we're looking at quite a lot is making sure that it's not the case that these tools are only available to sort of at a super high price to really high-end customers, but really making sure that there is that access to justice piece. One of the most exciting things about the changes from AI is that currently it is the case that to get world-class legal advice, there are substantial financial barriers. Things becoming much more accessible with AI. I think that's extremely important to kind of access to justice. I think that making sure to roll out ethically for that is very important.
Yeah, and that's something we support. And I know Clio, who sponsor the show, are hugely focused on trying to reduce that access to justice gap. And as I say, tech for good to help people that need it and get the support that they need for the justice they deserve. Yeah, really well said. Okay, and coming back maybe more to the O-shaped side of things, in a recent WilsonAI article, it states the skills that matter in an AI-first legal team. You share the shift to AI-first legal teams isn't coming; it's already here, and the legal professionals who lead in this new era, the ones who combine legal acumen, tech fluency, strategic process thinking, and human-centered client service. So can you share the importance of these 4 areas when it comes to integrating AI?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, so I think I'd really pick up on the last one there, is that often really the businesses are made up of people. And what we've seen that's fantastic is a lot of in-house teams are plugging the gaps across an entire business. So they're the people who are saying, I've spoken to someone who can help with automating this process. I've now spoken to like our InfoSec team, and they've like uploaded their policy, they've got it signed off. I've set up the system. I've now onboarded all of sales, trained them, and I'm starting to see the whole business moving faster. So I guess we picked up on 4 skills there, but I would probably say that being human centered in terms of managing the process across the business and juggling between stakeholders to make sure everyone hits their outcomes. That's what we're seeing fantastic legal teams doing. I think it's super impressive, and it's a challenging skill, but I think it's something that lawyers are extremely well placed to do.
Yeah, and the better they can become at that and become that more human-centered, my listeners will be sick to death of me saying it's not B2B, B2C, it's H to H, it's human-to-human connection that you can build in this year and beyond. So important. You've talked about sort of collaborating with paralegals and doing some classes. I want to just dive a little bit deeper because, you do offer classes and seminars, which not all sort of AI legal tech businesses do. And I think it's a really good thing to think about and adopt. So can you tell us more about the range of topics you covered during these workshops?
Yeah, of course. So often it is the case. One of the big topics that we're facing at the moment is how to generate great AI playbooks. So what that means really is when you have the AI starting to be able to do contract reviews for you in your style, what's really important is being able to really easily codify how it is that you review, what the points that you need to have the AI pick out are, and actually the way that you phrase those instructions for the AI is very important. So saying things like always check for this provision is very different to saying, make sure, or, I would like to see this, because the more formal and strict you are with your language, the higher the performance of the AI. So we're doing a lot of training to help people to get good outputs by having really good inputs. The other piece I would say, we're also doing training around how do you know how to quickly verify things? When should you be kind of suspicious or concerned about using AI? What are the areas where actually, one thing we've recently added into Wilson is an automatic escalation feature. So something high risk, but so that it will get sent to the lawyers. But we do a lot about training about making sure you're implementing the systems securely and in a safe and risk appropriate fashion.
Yeah, no, it all makes sense, and very good to educate people so it leads to adoption. This is the number one thing that we're hoping to encourage through people listening to the show is there are amazing tools and content and classes and things out there which can hopefully enhance adoption and tech for good. And I guess as we look to sort of close, what are the future plans you have for WilsonAI? I know it's difficult because when you say the next 5-10 years, because the world that we live in, I won't put a sort of number of years on it, but what does the future look like? And what are you most excited about as a CEO and co-founder of an exciting legal tech business?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, what we're seeing at the moment is like a massive increase in the pace to which AI is able to do tasks or the quality to which it's able to do those tasks. The reason that that's exciting is we're starting to see the quality of the reviews on contracts kind of coming up close to sort of, or sometimes even exceeding lawyer levels. What's interesting is then we're starting to chain that with other tasks. So it's moving a little bit towards, okay, the AI does an initial contract review. It then loops in 1 to 2 other stakeholders who give their feedback on a point. It then sends it to the, drafts an email to counterparty, sends it to them, assists with your negotiation, sends it all out on DocuSign, saves it down, extracts all the key terms. But you're seeing really it's chaining into more and more workflows. That's really interesting, I think, and very exciting. You then start to see the legal teams really as orchestrating the agents or giving them the ability of like what they should do at each particular point, and making sure that they're doing it in the style that the lawyers would with their risk profile. That's extremely powerful. They'll start to look a little bit more like AI workers than just AI tools, and I think that will be an extremely exciting transition.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's going to be a very productive, efficient, exciting world for those in the legal space. If they listen to content like this, they surround themselves with people like you, they get curious, they learn, and then take that action to actually adopt. Okay, as someone who is running a AI-driven platform, a business, what advice would you give to others looking to start, or what are some things they need to think about to avoid mistakes no doubt you've made?
Yeah, of course, absolutely. So I think for people thinking about starting, I would say get really close to the people you want to build things for. It's really worth understanding. Obviously, it helps if you yourself if you might be a customer for your own product, that's fantastic. But if that's not the case, I would spend a ton of time talking to people, really deep diving specifically into their problems and how you might be able to help. I think that's a fantastic way to start. After that, there's a ton of learning, and I'd recommend it as a fantastically satisfying experience. It's extremely challenging, but it's also like the hardest things you do often generate the most growth and they're extremely satisfying. So it's a great career path if people are thinking of starting up. I would recommend it.
Yeah, and I agree with that. The comfort zone is great, but nothing ever grows there. And, terrific is specific. The more specific it is, the more terrific it is. And I love that point as well. Great advice. Okay, if our listeners, which I'm sure they will, want to learn more about your career journey or indeed WilsonAI, where can they go to find out more? Feel free to share any websites, social media handles. We'll also share them in this episode for you too.
Brilliant. Thank you. Yeah, it's www.getwilson.ai, or you can find us on LinkedIn and Twitter. Those are probably the best platforms to reach out on. So yeah, thanks, Rob.
There we go. Well, it just leaves me to say thanks so much once again, Gus. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. So from all of us here on the Legally Speaking podcast, sponsored by Clio, wishing you lots of continued success with your career and indeed all things WilsonAI. But for now, over and out.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode. If you like the content here, why not check out our world-leading content and collaboration hub, the Legally Speaking Club, over on Discord. Go to our website, www.legallyspeakingpodcast.com, for the link to join our community there. Over and out.